Hey, it's Pete. I'm excited to introduce a new series. At least if I do another video after this about it, it'll be a series for the next 4 weeks or so, because I found some great books that I wanted to revisit for Garbaugust. And the first one that I'm talking about today is, what I found was these Planet of the Apes omnibuses, which reissue the novelizations of the second through the fifth movies. Obviously, there's no novelization of the first movie, although I'll come back to that in a second, because it was based on a original work, Pierre Boulle's book, Monkey Planet, published in the United States as Planet of the Apes, French novelist, author of Bridge on the River Kwai. One of the great, I haven't read it, but was one of the great classic American made World War II movies. Just an incredible movie, Bridge on the River Kwai. Anyway, we're not talking the Bridge on the River Kwai today. We're talking Planet of the Apes. And I guess I got to go the other way. That's kind of a crappy kind of JPEG. That's all I could get quickly, but it shows the first two books are in Volume 1, Beneath the Planet of the Apes and Escape from the Planet of the Apes. I read Beneath the Planet of the Apes, and then I rewatched the movie. So I'm going to talk about both. I'll put a thing up of the movie, probably. It's just better. This is the least spoilery movie poster I could find, although there will be spoilers, so don't know why I'm being cautious about that. That's General Ursus, the Gorilla General. Big part of this movie, and a mutant lady. I believe that's the lady mutant. There's mutants in this book. It's quite an extensive elaboration of the world from the first movie. I'm going to assume everybody watching this knows about Planet of the Apes, the original series, which was 5 movies. This screenplay was written by Paul Dehn. Paul Dehn, D-E-H-N. He would go on to write every screenplay for the rest of the series. The only one he didn't write was the Rod Serling one. The Rod Serling co-written one adaptation of the first movie. Rod Serling wasn't available to do the second. Turns out he didn't really like doing this kind of writing because it required too much rewriting, whereas in television he just banged out his scripts, and he was his own boss, and he didn't really enjoy the process of writing Planet of the Apes, so he begged out. A very strange thing about this movie, we got to talk about the movie first, I guess, because the movie begets the novelization. It's directed by Ted Post, which a name that's familiar to me. He directed a ton of TV movies. He directed one I watched the week after I saw this called The Night Slaves, which was based on a science fiction novel by Jerry Soule. Also starred James Franciscus, as this one did. He's a journeyman director, I guess is what you call it. Paul Dehn wrote. If I got this wrong, I better put this up. Paul Dehn wrote Goldfinger. I'm saying Dean, but what else did he write? He wrote The Spy Who Came In From the Cold. He wrote all the other adaptions. He wrote a lot of interesting stuff. So he was a top-notch screenwriter. This movie's a bit of a mess. It's a fun movie. I saw it when it came out, so I would have been. This is 1970, so I would have been 9. Was of course, over the moon, excited to see it. Here's a more spoilery one. They made a movie. They made a sequel to the best movie of all time, Planet of the Apes. And of course, I was going to see it with my family. We all went to see it. It was a bit disappointing, a bit confusing at the time. Later, I managed to catch part of it on TV. I never go back and watch old movies. At least till now, throughout my life. Now I'm doing a lot of it because I'm retired, but I don't know why I never rewatch movies like other people do. People tend to rewatch their favorite movies over and over, but anyway, once it was on TV when I was pretty young, and I was doing something that I don't do anymore. Watching TV, home alone, and decided with the activity I was doing that probably turning the sound down and putting Pink Floyd Dark Side of the Moon on and watching it with that, the way people traditionally do with The Wizard of Oz, but just to do my own version of that experiment. And that was a great trip. I'll just leave it at that for the kids out there. But so my only actual viewing of the movie was when I was 9. If you don't stop with those horns might go on for a while, because if somebody wants somebody's attention, they'll just hit the horn every 2 minutes until somebody looks out the window and sees that their friend is downstairs. Anyway. Okay, so they wanted to do a sequel because the movie made a ton of money. And reading about that on Wikipedia is kind of interesting. Hollywood's so different than today. Charlton Heston really did not want to do it. So apparently, back then there was no thought of like what they do now, is signing people to 20 sequels, and you're going to be in these Marvel movies. You're going to play Captain America for the next 40 years, whether you like it or not. Okay, somebody came out the window, so at least I'll just have a conversation now. So he didn't want to do it, and they kept pressuring him, and finally they wrote a script where he would just appear in the prologue and at the end to wrap things up. And he said he would do it if on 2 conditions: one, they'd kill his character off, spoiler alert, and the other condition is he was going to donate his salary to charity. I don't know what his objection to keeping the money from doing the work was, but it's nice. It's a nice story to hear about a guy who took a job for money, or took a job for relationships, really, just to get the producers off his back, and it was a job he didn't want to do, so he felt it wasn't his project, so he gave the money away. I think that's pretty impressive. He's a great. I don't care what anybody says. I think Charlton Heston was a great guy. He was by far my favorite actor when I was a kid, because of he was in all the 10 Commandments was on every Easter. I think it would be Easter, right? Which was awesome, and because he was Moses, and he was also in Planet of the Apes, which is the greatest film ever made. He was also in probably the 7th greatest movie ever made, Soylent Green. So he was like a action. He was the Omega Man. He did all these serious movies where he played like Van Gogh. Did he play Van Gogh or Michelangelo? He did one of those. Obviously, I haven't seen it, but he was that kind of actor. But he was also in the in the SF movies of the time. Who else is in the movie? Okay, here's an interesting guy. Victor Buono was in it. He plays one of the mutants, kind of a small part. Everybody's part is pretty small in this movie. Victor Buono, King Tut from the Batman TV series, was in it. There's these mutants that don't speak very much. They speak psychically, and they shoot their brains out. James Franciscus is the hero, the clone, the substitute for Heston. Similar type guy, but younger. Here he is, a handsome-looking fellow. Here he is with his astronaut gear out. The movie starts when his ship, which I think was being sent out to track down what happened to Taylor's ship, goes through the same time anomaly. And a nice thing about this movie is they decided to give people more information, so we find out they're 2,005 years in the future, something like that, from the 70s. Or almost 2,000 years. I think they're in, what would it be, 1970 something, because the movie was near future, and it's 3,000 years, 2,000 years in the future, in very short work, Franciscus, his name is Brent, meets Nova. And this is very much Nova's film. I'll show you there. That's Nova. Linda, and that's Heston there. That still's either from the beginning of the second movie or from the first movie. I want to make sure I get her name. Linda Harrison, very important figure in every young adolescent boy's life at the time. But she has an interesting role in this film because they didn't really give her much to do. So the director, according to Wikipedia or someplace I read, kind of worked with her just to give her some point to her character, and the direction he gave her was, you're just trying to understand people all the time because you're being bounced around between these two alien astronauts and these civilized apes, and you don't have the power of speech. They're more primitive. The humans from the future are more primitive, and so she's kind of the emotional core of the film, I would say. There is a gorilla character. A difference from the first movies, they decided to go more into the gorillas. The main gorilla, this guy, General Ursus, that's an interesting name, General Bear, was played by, and you can tell his voice right away, this fantastic character actor, Barney Miller's nemesis, the inspector who would come into Barney Miller's precinct and stir up trouble and make things difficult for Barney Miller and the crew. I know nobody knows what I'm talking about, but anyway, that was the old days. The plot is about the end of the world. What happens is James Franciscus gets caught up to speed on all the events of the first movie. He finds out that we're in the future. He finds out that our civilization has been destroyed and replaced by apes in Ape City. He finds out they're in the New York area because apparently right next to Ape City and right next to Forbidden Zone are the ruins of Queensboro Plaza and the New York subway system. Makes sense because we've already seen the Statue of Liberty. But they go down into one cave, Brent and Nova, and about 10 feet underground. So the apes, I'm going to have to say, are not the most curious of species as portrayed in this series, because there's practically right underneath them is a mutant civilization of people who have very good masking technology. I think probably left over, probably rediscovered from the Mission Impossible unit. Their masks are that good, but they have ugly mutant faces underneath the masks. This stuff, which is, gives it a whole other tickle. So now we find that Earth, the planet of the apes, in the year 3000 is apes ruling the surface from one city. We don't know what's going on there in the rest of the world, but there's one city of apes. It's divided into 3 tribes: the gorillas, the chimpanzees, the orangutans. Interestingly, the chimpanzees are the pacifists and the gentlest ones and the smartest ones, and I believe or I guess orangutans are considered the smartest species. But the chimpanzees are very, very, very violent, vicious, strong animals. Probably tougher and scarier than gorillas, except gorillas have the advantage of size. And chimpanzee groups do go to war with each other. I don't think gorillas do. If anybody knows more about this stuff in the comments, gorillas are 100% vegetarians. They eat leaves. They chew on whatever fruits they can find. Chimpanzees hunt insects. They use tools to hunt insects. What they'll do is they'll lick a stick or something, and they'll stick it in the ground and into an anthill, and then the ants will crawl over it and they'll pull it up and they'll eat all the ants off of it. So they're not strict vegetarians like they're shown in the TV series. Also, they'll take little monkeys and pull them apart and eat them. And so chimpanzees are not your friend. They'll pull your face off. Anyway, but at the time they're thought, they're smaller, they're cuter, they're probably the nice ones, and the gorillas are the violent ones. The series Planet of the Apes, I'm just gonna say it. I'm not ashamed to say it. It's very unfair to gorillas. There, I said it. Cancel me if you want. Planet of the Apes is not nice to gorillas. Anyway, but the gorillas are cool. You just have to know, for the purpose of the world, the gorillas are the brutish ones, the angry ones, the general is cunning and vicious and wants to destroy the mutants, which he doesn't know exists, but let's just go with it. It's a 95-minute movie, which is amazing. Amazing that they would make an epic like this, an epic sequel, and keep it under 2 hours. I just can't imagine a thing like that happening today. God knows how long the new 8 movies are. They're probably 2 hours 15 minutes or so. I'm not the biggest. I've tried to like them. The first 2 are pretty decent. I think they get worse each one. I didn't even watch the last one, but so these are completely different though. And then it's not a bad movie. It's got some flaws. It's got a doomsday message. It's got the darkest ending of any movie. I can't believe I saw this at 9 years old and I didn't just like jump out of the car on the way home and run over the barrier to the other side and end it all. They do not make movies like this anymore. That's for sure. You would not even find the most serious Manchester by the Sea tragedy kind of movie or made in Poland or anything that has as dark of an ending as this, where I'm going to spoil it if you haven't listened to the other spoiling learnings, where after Nova is brutally killed by one of the apes, I think by Ursus, I can't remember. Taylor is already pretty black-pilled. After seeing at the end of the first movie, he finds out that the human race destroyed itself and let itself be taken over by apes. And Brent is pretty much the same way. As soon as he sees that there's apes in charge, he's like, I just want to get up back in the sky. I don't want anything to do with this planet. So Taylor's pretty black-pilled. The mutants are pretty evil. They torture Brent and they're sanctimonious, much like the apes who claim they don't kill or harm, or ape shall not kill ape. And the mutants are like, we don't kill anybody, we're completely nonviolent. So they use their psychic powers to try and get Brent and Taylor to beat each other to death. So that's the type of civilization we're left with on the Earth. Those are your choices. The primitive humans, which don't show up much in this, that are oppressed and brutalized by the apes. The apes themselves, who have all their interracial struggles between the three species of apes, and these horrible mutants who are the worst ones yet, which you can tell because they're ugly. Because a movie that equates with evil. They have nice faces. They pull off their Mission Impossible masks, and they show them to the bomb, which is their god. They worship the Doomsday Machine, which is this big gold missile. Here we come, something like Goldfinger might have, or a current president. It's got Alpha on one wing and Omega on the other. It's a doomsday weapon, one weapon that's powerful enough to destroy everything. The mutants worship it like a bunch of dummies. So it's kind of a death cult, and they show their it's pretty actually pretty clever idea. They pull their masks off to show their true faces, which are because of nuclear war. I assume is the reason for the mutations. But they've been living underground for 2,000 years, and they haven't really gotten anything going yet. They're a mile from Ape City, and they're just kind of hanging out, and all of a sudden everything's like coming to a head 2,000 years in the future on one particular day. Zaius, the orangutan leader, Zaius is they're kind of the politicians of the world, the leaders of the world, the orangutans, and he really wants to suppress history, just like he did in the other movies. Zira and Cornelius play a little bit of a part in the plot. They help Brent. They try and help him escape when Brent and Nova are captured by the by the gorillas, but they don't really play a big part in this movie. And Cornelius, in fact, was not played by Roddy McDowall. It's the only time. It's the only live-action original series Planet of the Apes thing where Roddy McDowall did not have a part of it. He was in the other 4 movies. And he was in the spin-off TV series. He was a regular on that show too. And I'll talk about that when we come to it, because I bought all these books. There's 4 omnibuses. There's one is Beneath the Planet of the Apes by Michael Avallone, and then the next 4 movies. Then after that, and then the next omnibus 2 would be the final 2 movies in the original series, plus a novelization of the Tim Burton 2001 movie, the great Mark Wahlberg, Our Generation's Charlton Heston was in the 2001 movie. Don't know if I'm going to read that. I mean, it is Garbaugust, but you're asking a lot for someone to read the novelization of 2001's Planet of the Apes movie, which was a standalone because they rebooted it again, starting with that James Franco movie, which was pretty good, that James Franco Planet of the Apes. I want to talk a little bit more about the authors. Okay, so this novelization, which I read, so there was Dehn's idea, Paul Dehn's idea, to kind of focus on the fear of nuclear war, which ends this film. So, I forgot, I was going through the end. Taylor destroys the world. He deliberately leans after Nova's been killed and Brent is killed. So there's your 2 leads of the movie, both shot dead. Remember, I'm 9 years old. Taylor is shot in the gut. He crawls off to reach for the lever for the bomb, pulls the bomb, because F you, there's no reason to live. Fuck this planet. Fuck the humans for messing up in the first place. Fuck the mutants and the apes for going to war. Where am I gonna find that? Okay. Okay, here it is. Then, how do you end a movie like that with just a silhouette of sort of a reverse focus, very 60s kind of effect of a colored negative of the bomb, fading out. And so there's a little bit of an epilogue read by a name that every kid would have known from those days. I mean, I didn't look him up. They're read by a narrator who everybody who gone to the movies in those days would have known. Very famous. I really should look it up. I'll put it in the comments. Not that people care, but a really famous voiceover guy whose voice appeared in trailers and things like that of very serious films. And it reads something like this, because it's produced in the novel, and this can segue me into reviewing the novel. The universe at present contains billions upon billions of spiral galaxies. In one of them, 1/3 from the edge, is a medium-sized star, and one of its satellites, a green and insignificant planet, is now dead. Curtains, don't forget to take your empties out with when you go. Drive home, have a nice evening. Very dark, but not extremely rare in the 60s. There was movies that had happy endings. There was movies that had unhappy endings. There was movies that had ambivalent endings. There was a lot more freedom. There was a lot more thought and artistry, and everything went into the creation of our popular art. This is the ending you would get from a very dark, serious film, adults only, don't bring your kids. Not a fun time action. These are people made up as apes running around shooting each other. Just something to notice. Just something I noticed. That it's very different now. I think people would be very unhappy if you did that with a Marvel movie, to say the least, or any kind of a franchise. But But all is not lost because the next year there's a sequel. Now, how could there be a sequel? The whole world was destroyed. I don't think they pre-planned a sequel. I don't think they did things like that in these days, and I'll tell you why. Because I just don't think they did, for one thing. One thing you notice in watching old movies, when you watch them in order, like the old Frankenstein series, is they're never quite direct sequels. They change the facts they need to change. They change the facts of the ending so they can tell a new story. And that's fine, because they know you're not going to look it up on it. They know you can't go to Wikipedia, look up the plot, and, go to IMDb and write a really angry comment about about bloopers and things like that. You can't do a 25-minute video on all the problems you had with it and look up all the actors or the credits and things like that. That was not the world we lived in, which is fine. It was a better world. I think that level of freedom really helped them tell good stories because they weren't bound by the lore, they weren't bound by anything except trying to tell a good, entertaining story. So they changed what they needed to change. This one's pretty consistent with what we learned in the first movie. I believe it was only 2 years later that this came out. They made them pretty quick. But one reason specifically I think they were not thinking of the sequel, and the sequel's called Escape from the Planet of the Apes, is something I will talk about later in the next video, because there's a scene in here how they would do these novelizations. Usually they wanted them to come out when the movie came out, as close to possible as they could. So they were not really based on the movies. They were based on the script, the most current script that was available when they gave out the contract for writing it. So oftentimes you get little gems in some of these. There's a famous one in Alien, where there's a cut scene from Alien, which you can now see, but at the time you couldn't. Where Alan Dean Foster added back in a scene where Ripley is running through the ship and she sees all the other crew members whom she thinks are already dead are actually tied up, webbed up in to be hosts, and they beg Ripley to kill them with her flamethrower, which she does. But that was not in the original cut of the movie because they felt it was for a pacing thing and for a confusion thing, because that's what they decided to do. So there's a scene like that in this novelization. There's a short scene with Cornelius and Zira, the friendly, the allies of the humans who are back in the ape city because they don't approve of war, and they have a little discussion over dinner about, I wonder how the war's going, and they're always bickering, and so Zira says to Cornelius, her husband, well, you're never going to do anything about it anyway. Cut to the final scene where Taylor ends up destroying the world. So we know where in this version, and it could be a scene that Michael Avallone just wrote up for the book, but I'm going to have to say in a minute that I don't think Michael Avallone was doing a lot of extra creative work that he didn't need to. So I think it was probably a scene that was just in the movie that was cut out for pacing, again, because we're in the big final conflict, and you're going to go back to the village and discuss it with the war with two characters that aren't really involved in the story at this point. I don't think so, but it puts them in a different place than they would have to be logically for the third movie. But it's and it's not canon, of course, because it doesn't appear in the movie. But they're up to some stuff in Escape from the Planet of the Apes that they would not have had time to do if this was a accurate sequel. And God bless them, because that's how they came up with an idea for a third movie after destroying the world. This book, the novelization, I'm sorry I went on so long. The novelization was by Michael Avallone. And I'll talk about him in a second, but I thought a nice touch of the novelization is he dedicated it to Pierre Boulle, the writer of the original Planet of the Apes. There's no novelization of Planet of the Apes because they just reissued the book with a cover from the movies, even though it's a very loose adaptation of the original novel. So there is no accurate novelization of the original 1968 movie Planet of the Apes, because back then what they do, if it was a novel, they would just, and I guess they still do this today, they would slap a promotional movie cover on it. There are a few exceptions though. One was Moonraker. The James Bond film Moonraker was so different than the book that they felt like they could reissue the book Moonraker by Ian Fleming, and also issue a second book called Ian Fleming's Moonraker, or James Bond in Ian Fleming's Moonraker, I think was the title. And that was a novelization of the film, which has very little to do with the movie. There's a couple others like that too. There's one that came out called The Four Musketeers, because The Three Musketeers was a movie by Richard Lester, I think, that they split into two films. They filmed them together and they split them in two, like they would do later with Superman. And so they issued The Three Musketeers as its own book, and then they, instead of just reprinting the second half of the Three Musketeers, they did a novelization called The Four Musketeers. And I believe there's one more I can think of, but it's not going to come to mind in time. I have to cough again. I don't know how I got off on the subject, but I'm going to keep going with it. There is another famous story that I read about in some article about Philip K. Dick. He turned down the option to turn his own novel, Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep, into a novelization of the very unfaithful, very dumbed down movie that everyone likes called Blade Runner. He had the option, maybe because of the contract he sold the book for or whatever, that they could either reissue his, what they ended up doing is reissuing Do Androids Dream of Electric Sheep under the movie title Blade Runner with Harrison Ford on the cover, and to the confusion of anybody who actually would bother to read the book, I guess. Trying to figure out how this came from that. There's a few things that are similar in it. But for a bigger fee, he could take their script and write it as a novelization, and he chose not to do that, which shows integrity, because he always needed a lot of money, but he wasn't the best person with money. Probably should have done it, considering his financial situation, and he only lived a couple more years anyway, but fortunately he didn't, and people can still be introduced to the real Philip K. Dick by picking up the novelization Blade Runner and thinking they're going to get the same dumb action movie with Harrison Ford, and they actually get something really deep and profound and very, very, very confusing. A flawed book, but a really wonderful one if you want to think about the issues that Blade Runner barely touches on. So there's my annual or my semi-annual rant against Blade Runner, which I don't like, because it's no Planet of the Apes. I mean, come on. Planet of the Apes. Michael Avallone, the author of this novel, was very, very, very prolific writer of his own books, private eye books and things like that, but especially of tie-ins, especially TV tie-ins. If you're around in this time, you knew the name Michael Avallone. If you cared about any kind of TV shows or tie-ins or things, he did The Man from U.N.C.L.E. books. He might have done the Girl from U.N.C.L.E. books. I'm not sure. They might have got somebody else. He also did the Partridge Family books. That was his world. And I have to say, I mean, I respect the effort, but there are some really clunky sentences in this novelization. And he probably wrote it in 30 days or 2 weeks or whatever they gave him, so I can't be too hard on him. Let's see if I manage to save these, because a lot of times I don't save on my... Yeah, I don't think I saved them. There's a couple. No annotations. Yeah. See, I should, if I'm gonna do annotations, I should really use my big Kindle and not my Books Palma, because the annotation stuff doesn't work very well in the app. That's something to consider if you buy a Books Palma. And when you use the Kindle app, a lot of the features don't really work very well. For some reason, the page count, the page numbering thing doesn't ever show up at the bottom. That's one strange thing. Like this, see, it shows the location there when you go out, but when you go into the actual page, it shows nothing there at the bottom. And you Kindle readers and Kindle app users are very familiar where there's some different options there. The default is to show the location in the corner. Or you can switch it to page, which will approximate a page count, or time left in book, which is highly inaccurate. But I like to have those things on the page, so you don't get them with the Books Palma Kindle app. I don't know why. It doesn't work. Sometimes it'll work. It'll work in like 1 out of every 200 books. So like every month for my reading. So I can't really go into any of Michael Avallone's not great writing. At the last chapter that I mentioned, and part of it I think is editing problem. Part of it is a page count problem. Because what I was saying earlier about, I don't think he added that scene because I think he was trying to. He might have added that scene. He was trying to spin things out. Like here's this. The last chapter is called Armageddon, and earlier in this video, I read the ending of a movie, and he intersperses that narration with strange poetic writing. It's instead of starting out, the universe at present contains billions upon billions of spiral galleries, it starts out, listen if you have the ears to hear. The wind is speaking again. Then it goes into the narration from the movie. The universe at present contains billions upon billions of spiral galaxies. In one of them, 1/3 from the edge is a medium-sized star. Then it goes back into Michael Avallone, adding, embellishing. Only a small blackened wisp, if you have the eyes to see it, or the heart to care. So up here we have, if you have the ears to hear, if you have the eyes to see, or if you have the heart to care. I think the theory being that there's no one left at this part in the book. It's a very hard thing to handle narratively. A passage of a book after every single character's dead, not even nothing but the stars to look at it. Okay, and one of the satellites, a green and insignificant planet. Cut to Michael Avallone, blank, white, glaring, is now dead. Cut back to Michael Avallone. Silence. There is nothing more. There is nothing left. It is as it was in the beginning. Wasteland. He's really stretching it out there. See, he's really got to meet that page count. So maybe he did make up that Zira and Cornelia scene, although I don't think so, because that was original writing. And there, what he's doing in the last chapter is just redundantly describing what's actually been just described by the narrator. So I would not say that Mr. Avallone's work blew me away. It was fun to read because I haven't read a novelization in a very long time. It's not like reading Once Upon a Time in Hollywood, obviously, where it's a completely different version of the same story. It's kind of blow by the script. Would I recommend it? In a way, I would. It's fun to read it and watch the movie, and because I've got the whole set of books which has these movies and then goes on to a handful of adaptions of some of the scripts of the TV series, which I watched as a kid when I could, and was heartbroken that they canceled after one season. I couldn't believe they canceled. How could you cancel the greatest television series of all time based on the greatest film series of all time based on the greatest original film property of all time? It made no sense to me, and you're keeping you're keeping Starsky and Hutch on the air, but I'll talk more about that when I get through these. Hopefully I'll spend less time on them, but what the hell. As I was talking about on one of my other reviews, and I talked with Faces Book Reviews about no one cares, and that's not meant as a negative. That's the freeing part. No one cares, so you can screw up. If you screw up, no one's going to remember. No one's going to watch all your videos unless they hear what you have to say and want to hear what you have to say. I should stop, but yeah, I think I'll stop. I have some other ideas about BookTube and YouTube and the algorithm and all that kind of stuff, which might be fun to talk about at another time. But we'll just keep this to Beneath the Planet of the Apes, which is the first sequel to the Planet of the Apes series. And long may it wave. People will still be watching it in 100 years when they've forgotten all the movies with the guy who plays Golem in them. They'll still be watching Planet of the Apes. They'll still be watching movies from the 70s. A few kooks will be still downloading ebooks of the novelizations of these movies, which are not as immortal as the original novel or the original series. But that's what we have. And now I will reset. I will ascend to the heavens, looking down on the burnt, scorched earth and all the dead apes and all the dead humans, and just think about my place in the universe. Thank you, BookTube.